Hey, it's okay. Just stay here.
What's happening?
Don't worry, sweetie. Everything's fine.
The sound pierced through the evening air like a knife through silk. It wasn't the volume that made everyone turn, but the raw emotion behind it. A child's voice, small but unshakable, spoke words that carried the weight of absolute trust. "Daddy, please help her." In that instant, the world seemed to hold its breath. Silverware paused mid-motion. Laughter died in throats. And one worn-down father, slumped in a torn leather booth, felt something awaken inside him. He wasn't a fighter. He wasn't looking for confrontation. He was simply a man who had made his daughter a promise, that no matter what, she would never face darkness alone. Before we continue this journey together, if you believe in the power of ordinary people rising to extraordinary moments, in kindness conquering cruelty, and in the courage it takes to stand up when everyone else sits down, please take a second to like this video, share it with someone who could use some inspiration today, and subscribe to our channel. Also, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Your support helps these stories find the people who need them most. Daniel Wright had become an expert in making himself invisible. 3.5 years had passed since his wife's death, and in that time, life had shrunk into a relentless cycle of overtime shifts, discount groceries, overdue notices, and whispered promises to a photograph he kept beside his bed. He loaded trucks at night, earning just enough to keep the lights on. By day, he worked part-time at a local community center, mopping floors and fixing broken equipment. His hands were always sore, his back always aching, and his mind always running calculations about which bills could wait another week. That particular evening, he had taken his 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, to the 24-hour diner on Route 9 because it was the one place that still felt like a treat without breaking the bank. Sophie loved watching the neon sign flicker in the window, loved the way the older server always remembered her name, loved the chocolate chip pancakes that came with whipped cream shaped like a smiley face. For Daniel, those moments of watching his daughter's eyes light up were worth more than any luxury he could imagine. It was a brief escape from the crushing pressure of single parenthood and financial survival. The danger didn't announce itself with fanfare. It crept in slowly the way poison seeps through cracks. Two men had been occupying the corner booth for hours, their voices growing louder with each drink, their movements becoming more aggressive. When a young server accidentally bumped their table while balancing plates, one of them snatched her arm with unnecessary force, his words crude and threatening. The other blocked her escape route, laughing like it was all some kind of game. The restaurant fell into an uncomfortable silence. Customers suddenly found their phones fascinating. Others stared intently at their food. The manager, young and uncertain, hesitated behind the counter, clearly weighing his minimum wage against getting involved. Daniel saw everything. His stomach tightened with recognition and dread. He understood the situation immediately, but he also understood his position. He had no savings, no backup plan, no one to call if things went sideways. He had a daughter depending on him, and taking a risk meant possibly losing everything they had left. He tried to convince himself it wasn't his problem, that someone else would step in, that the situation would resolve itself. He focused on cutting Sophie's pancakes into smaller pieces, trying to keep her distracted. But then the server's voice cracked with genuine fear, her attempts to pull away becoming more desperate. And Sophie, with the moral clarity that only children possess, slid out of her seat and tugged on her father's sleeve. She didn't understand the complexity of adult fears or the consequences of intervention. She only knew that someone was being hurt, and her daddy had always taught her that hurting people was wrong. Her voice cut through every rationalization Daniel had constructed. "Daddy, please help her." Something shifted inside Daniel's chest. The fear didn't disappear, but it was suddenly eclipsed by something more powerful. The weight of his daughter's faith in him, the example he was setting in this moment, the kind of man he wanted her to remember. He stood up slowly, his legs feeling unsteady, his heart hammering against his ribs. The movement caught the attention of one of the men, who turned with an ugly sneer, already sizing Daniel up and finding him wanting. Without warning, the man shoved Daniel hard in the chest, sending him stumbling backward. The second push came immediately after, this time accompanied by mocking laughter and a string of insults meant to humiliate him in front of everyone watching. What happened next wasn't pretty or heroic. There were no slow-motion moments or perfectly choreographed moves. It was chaotic, desperate, and driven purely by the need to protect. Daniel moved on instinct alone, deflecting a wild punch, using his lower center of gravity to drive forward, grabbing the edge of a table for leverage. One attacker lost his footing and went down hard, his head cracking against the booth frame. The other lunged forward, but Daniel caught him off balance, redirecting his momentum into the counter. Within moments, both men were on the ground, more stunned than seriously hurt, the entire diner erupting in shocked gasps and nervous chatter. Daniel stepped back immediately, his hands trembling violently, his mind already spiraling into worst-case scenarios. He wasn't thinking about victory or justice. He was thinking about assault charges, legal fees he couldn't afford, losing his jobs, failing his daughter. The manager was already on the phone with police. The server was crying, her hands covering her face. Sophie stood perfectly still, her expression a mixture of confusion and something that might have been pride. When the police arrived, the atmosphere was tense. But then something unexpected happened. Witnesses began speaking up, their earlier silence transformed into vocal support. The security camera footage told an undeniable story. The officers listened, took statements, and after what felt like an eternity, informed Daniel he was free to go. No charges would be filed. He was simply defending someone in danger. But as Daniel walked Sophie to their battered old car, he felt no relief, only a deep, bone-tired worry about what tomorrow might bring. Sleep was impossible that night. Daniel lay in bed replaying every second, wondering if he had just destroyed the fragile stability he'd fought so hard to maintain. Would the story spread? Would his employers see him as a liability? Would there be retaliation? By morning, exhaustion and anxiety had formed a knot in his chest that wouldn't loosen. He got Sophie ready for school with extra care, holding her a little longer than usual before walking her to the bus stop. At work, he moved through his tasks like a ghost, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Just before lunch, his supervisor appeared, face carefully neutral, and asked him to come to the main office. Daniel's stomach dropped. This was it. He was being let go. He followed in silence, trying to figure out how he would explain this to Sophie, how he would keep them afloat while job hunting. But when he entered the office, he found someone completely unexpected waiting for him. A woman in her 40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit, sat calmly in one of the chairs, a leather portfolio resting on her lap. She stood as he entered, extending her hand with a professional but warm smile. She introduced herself as Victoria Chin, Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Hospitality Solutions, the corporation that owned the diner and 17 other properties in the region. Daniel's mind went blank with confusion and fear. Why would a CEO personally come to see him? This had to be about legal liability, about protecting the company from potential lawsuits. He braced himself for what he was certain would be threats disguised as concern, lawyers ready to bury him if he caused trouble. Instead, Victoria asked him to sit down and did something he never expected. She thanked him. She explained that she had been immediately notified about the incident through their safety reporting system and had personally reviewed every detail, including the security footage and witness statements. She spoke about her own experiences, about growing up in a neighborhood where people turned away from trouble, where fear and apathy had become survival mechanisms. She talked about how rare it was to see someone actually stand up when it mattered, especially someone with everything to lose. Then Victoria told him something that made his throat tighten. The young server he had helped was named Amanda. She was 23 years old, working 3 jobs to support her younger brother while putting herself through nursing school. That night at the diner had been her last shift before seriously considering dropping out because the stress and harassment had become unbearable. She had been one bad night away from giving up on everything. Daniel's intervention hadn't just stopped an assault. It had quite possibly saved her entire future. Victoria Chin leaned forward slightly, her expression shifting from professional to something more personal, more genuine. She told Daniel that the company had already taken care of the legal side of things, ensuring the 2 men from the diner would face appropriate consequences and restraining orders. Amanda would receive counseling support and a transfer to a safer location if she wanted it. But Victoria hadn't come just to deliver good news about someone else. She had come because of what she saw in Daniel. She explained that Meridian Hospitality Solutions had been struggling with something that couldn't be fixed with training manuals or corporate policies. They needed people who genuinely understood what it meant to protect others, who could recognize danger before it escalated, who had the moral courage to act when action was required. The company was expanding their safety and guest relations program across all their properties, and they needed someone to help build it from the ground up. Not just oversee it, but shape it with real-world understanding and authentic compassion. Victoria offered Daniel a position as regional safety coordinator. It came with a salary that was nearly double what he was making from both his current jobs combined. Full benefits, including health insurance and dental coverage. Consistent daytime hours that would let him be there when Sophie got home from school. A retirement plan. Professional development opportunities. the kind of stability he had stopped allowing himself to dream about years ago. Daniel sat in stunned silence, certain he had misunderstood something. People like him didn't get offers like this. People who lived paycheck to paycheck, who wore second-hand clothes and drove cars held together with prayers and duct tape, didn't get executive attention and life-changing opportunities. There had to be a catch, some hidden expectation or impossible requirement he was missing. But Victoria simply smiled, recognizing the disbelief in his eyes. She told him she understood his hesitation, that she knew what it was like to wait for the other shoe to drop when you'd spent so long barely surviving. She gave him her direct contact information, encouraged him to take 24 hours to think it over, to ask any questions he needed, and assured him this wasn't charity or some feel-good publicity stunt. They genuinely needed someone with his instincts and his character. As Daniel walked out of that office, the world felt different somehow. The fluorescent lights seemed brighter. The weight on his shoulders felt fractionally lighter. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't just about survival. He thought about being able to take Sophie to a real doctor when she got sick instead of hoping it would pass. About buying groceries without calculating every item. About maybe, eventually, having enough breathing room to actually live instead of just endure. That evening, he picked Sophie up from school early, something he rarely had the flexibility to do. Her face lit up with surprise and delight when she saw him waiting by the gates. They went back to the same diner, but this time Daniel didn't count the dollars in his wallet before they walked in. They sat by the window where the afternoon sun created patterns on their table. Amanda was working again, and when she saw them enter, her entire demeanor changed. She approached their table with genuine warmth, her eyes bright with recognition. She thanked Daniel quietly, her voice thick with emotion, and told him that because of what he did, she had decided to stay in school. She had even received a scholarship she had applied for months ago and forgotten about. Everything was starting to feel possible again. She gave Sophie an extra-large serving of whipped cream on her hot chocolate and refused to let Daniel pay for their meal, insisting it was the least she could do. Sophie waved enthusiastically at Amanda throughout their visit, clearly proud of her father in a way that made Daniel's eyes sting. As they sat together, Sophie chattering about her day at school, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time. Hope. Not the desperate, clawing kind of hope that comes from desperation, but the quiet, steady kind that comes from realizing that sometimes, despite everything, doing the right thing actually matters. He held his daughter's small hand across the table, feeling the warmth of her palm against his, and understood something profound. Courage wasn't always about being fearless or strong. Sometimes it was about being absolutely terrified and acting anyway because someone needed you. Sometimes it whispered through a child's unwavering belief that their parent could make things right. Over the following weeks, Daniel transitioned into his new role. The learning curve was steep, but Victoria had meant what she said about support. He attended training sessions, worked with security professionals, and began developing protocols that prioritized both safety and dignity. He visited each of Meridian's properties, talking to staff about their concerns, listening to stories of harassment and fear that had been dismissed or ignored for too long. Amanda transferred to one of the company's upscale locations downtown, where the clientele was different and the support system was stronger. She sent Daniel a text message one evening, a simple thank you accompanied by a photo of her acceptance letter to an accelerated nursing program. She was going to make it after all. Sophie started noticing changes too. Her father was home for dinner most nights now. He smiled more easily. The tension that had always seemed to hover around him like a storm cloud had begun to lift. When she asked him why things were different, Daniel struggled to find the right words. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that her simple faith in him had changed everything? That her instinct to help someone in trouble had set in motion a series of events that transformed their entire lives? Instead, he told her something she could understand. He told her that when you see someone who needs help, and you have the ability to do something about it, you should always try. Even when it's scary. Even when you don't know what will happen. Because that's what good people do, and she had reminded him what kind of person he wanted to be. Months passed, and the story of what happened at the diner became something of a legend within Meridian Hospitality Solutions. Not because it was dramatically retold or exaggerated, but because it represented something the company wanted to embody. The idea that their employees weren't just workers filling positions, but human beings with the capacity for extraordinary decency. New training materials began incorporating real scenarios based on Daniel's experience. Staff meetings included discussions about the responsibility everyone shared to create safe environments. Daniel never sought recognition for what he had done. He showed up to work, did his job with the same quiet dedication he had always brought to everything, and went home to his daughter. But people noticed. Employees at various locations began reaching out to him directly when they encountered problems, trusting him to actually listen and act. Guests occasionally recognized him from internal company communications and thanked him for making them feel safer. One evening, nearly a year after the incident, Daniel received an unexpected call from Victoria Chin. The company was hosting an annual awards ceremony, and she wanted him to attend as a guest of honor. He tried to decline, uncomfortable with the attention, but Victoria gently insisted. She explained that sometimes people needed to see that doing the right thing didn't always lead to punishment or regret. Sometimes it led to recognition and opportunity. His story mattered to people who felt powerless in their own situations. Reluctantly, Daniel agreed. The ceremony was held at one of Meridian's premier hotel ballrooms, far fancier than anywhere he had ever been. He wore a suit that Victoria's assistant had helped him select, feeling awkward and out of place among the executives and senior staff. Sophie came with him, wearing a new dress that she insisted on twirling in every chance she got. When Victoria called Daniel to the stage, the applause was genuine and sustained. She spoke about the incident briefly, focusing not on the confrontation itself but on the choice Daniel had made. The choice to act when others didn't. The choice to protect someone vulnerable despite his own vulnerabilities. The choice to show his daughter that principles mattered more than convenience. Then Victoria announced something Daniel hadn't been expecting. Meridian Hospitality Solutions was establishing an annual scholarship in his name, focused on supporting children of single parents pursuing education. The first recipient would be Amanda's younger brother, who had dreams of becoming a teacher but couldn't afford college. The scholarship would ensure that financial hardship wouldn't stand in the way of potential. Daniel could barely speak when handed the microphone. He managed to say thank you, to express his gratitude for the opportunity he had been given, and to acknowledge that he had only done what anyone should do. But even as he said the words, he knew they weren't quite true. Most people didn't act. Most people looked away. And while he understood why, fear, uncertainty, self-preservation, he also understood that progress only happened when someone finally decided the risk was worth it. As the evening wound down and guests mingled over dessert and coffee, Amanda appeared at Daniel's table with her brother in tow. The young man shook Daniel's hand with almost overwhelming enthusiasm, thanking him not just for the scholarship but for helping his sister when she needed it most. Amanda's eyes were bright with tears of gratitude and pride. She was graduating from nursing school in 3 weeks and had already accepted a position at a children's hospital. Everything she had worked for was finally coming together. Sophie, who had been remarkably patient throughout the long ceremony, tugged on Daniel's sleeve. She asked if they could go home soon because she had school in the morning. Daniel laughed, the sound genuine and light, and agreed. As they walked to the car through the cool evening air, Sophie slipped her hand into his and said something that would stay with him forever. "Daddy, I'm glad you helped that lady. You're a good helper." Daniel stopped walking for a moment, kneeling down to his daughter's eye level. He looked at her serious little face, at the absolute certainty in her expression, and felt emotion rise in his throat. He pulled her into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his chest. "You helped too, sweetheart," he whispered. "You reminded me what was important. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary courage, that one moment of bravery can create ripples that touch countless lives, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to remember their own strength. Subscribe to our channel to stay connected with more stories that celebrate the best of humanity. Your engagement helps these messages reach the people who need them most. Before we close, we have one special request. Please leave a comment below with a single word that captures how this story made you feel. Your words create a community of hope and inspiration for everyone who visits. Daniel Wright never became a celebrity. His name didn't trend on social media or appear in newspaper headlines. But in one diner, on one ordinary evening, an exhausted single father chose courage over fear. He chose to act when it would have been easier to look away. And because of that choice, because of one child's faith and one man's decision to honor it, lives were quietly but permanently transformed. Sometimes the most powerful changes happen not in grand gestures or public spectacles, but in small moments when someone decides that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. Sometimes heroes wear worn-out work boots and carry the weight of the world on tired shoulders. And sometimes all it takes to change everything is a child's voice saying, "Daddy, please help her."